Welcome, Metal Warriors, another episode of the Album Club. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Marty. It's good to see everyone. Hope you're all doing great this fine week. Heat finally broke up here in the north. It was like almost 100 the other day. It was terrible, and I can't imagine what it's like living in the south. You fools!
I have great AC.
yeah. I walk outside. It's like walking into a wet, warm blanket. It's awful. Kellen, how you doing?
Good, yeah. No, I was up 90, almost 100 today, so it's gonna be that way till this weekend. But surviving. But yeah, doing well. Let's see. This week, it's basically been a trip down American power metal lane for me. So,
Yep.
I, was actually fortunate enough to grab a copy, metal bait pressing of this. I found it by chance. Totally lucky. He's hanging up on a wall somewhere for I think $30. So
It's worth it.
I was like, yeah, I'm taking that. I will take a Warning of Danger metal bait pressing of that. But just to kind of go and get into this world. So some of the other records that I have that I've brought up here in the four. This is Hellstar Nosferatu, and none of these are. I mean, all these are just killer, comfortable records that I've listened to tons. But that's kind of what this week I needed from my music. So all of that stuff just very welcome. I did talk about this is a lesser known band that people may not be aware of. I did a video on this last year. This is from Jackson, Michigan. This is Enchanter with Defenders of the Realm. Anyone wants to check that out? It's a good, lesser known American sort of power metal, epic heavy metal band, but may want to check that out.
You also did a little expose on them on your channel too, on Killing for Company.
So not a lot of bands that you don't think of. We're going to be talking about Californians tonight, but Michigan, hey, Jackson, Michigan.
Yeah.
So,
prison town.
Yeah. And then another band, I talked a little bit about the other week about Scythian. This is a band that I really enjoyed their debut, but have kind of gone missing over the past few years. A newer band called Solicitor from Washington, Seattle, Washington, speed metal band. I don't know what they're up to, but I've been wanting a new record from this outfit. They've had I think EP and done lots of touring, but this was released on Gates of Hell back in I think 2019, and would love to get a new record from that band. But that's been spinning over here at Killing for Company.
All right, awesome. Logan, how you doing?
Doing great. Kind of like you up in Michigan. It felt like the heat finally broke. Like over the weekend, all of a sudden, it went from being like heat index of 109 to now we're like in the mid 90s and stuff. It's really nice. It's really something. And in the evening hours, it almost feels like fall, which my favorite time of year.
It's starting to look like that here too. Leaves are starting to change.
Yep. People are putting up the Halloween decorations in stores, and even around here, Halloween is huge in New Orleans, surprisingly enough. And then, of course, you're starting to see like Oktoberfests in stores as well. And the pumpkin beers will be soon behind, which I can't wait. As far as spinning, I've actually got a Bandcamp pull. Oh, there we go. Look. So this was, I just found this earlier in the week. I think I've heard this band mentioned periodically, probably on this channel. It's kind of a weird name to me, and probably why I've never checked it out. Seer Bliss. I don't know. What are we going with there? I'm not fully sure. But this is their new album, Heavenly Down. And it kind of caught me on first listen. It's supposedly symphonic black metal, but it's like a more grittier, like almost death metal oriented version of that kind of sound. And there's there's some synths, but they're not overbearing. They're kind of perfectly in the middle. And there's actually like a brass section. There's someone playing tuba on here.
Yeah, and it works well.
It does. So you've heard this one, Marty?
I have not heard that one. I've got their first 3 or so or 4 records.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is my first chance with this band, or first exposure, but it was good. I was kind of surprised. I've only heard it twice, but I'm definitely going to keep keep spinning it and see, where it sticks for the year. And then proof that heavy metallurgy works as far as introducing you to new bands. Kellen already mentioned them. Boom! This came in the other day.
There it is.
Oh yeah, Deja Vu, a little Scythian action from a couple weeks ago. Hubris and Excelsius. Came in on Saturday. Been spinning it since then. Holds up and has probably gotten better. So cheers, Kellen. Good pull. And then some self promotion. I released a new video over the weekend. It's the latest Goodwill haul. I know. If you're interested,
How did I miss that? I'll be watching that tonight.
Marty, come on! I thought you were an avid follower of what I pick up.
I don't know if I want to get upset because you always find something that's interesting.
Here, I'll give you a little preview of what you could get upset about. So I found the ultimate greatest.
I guess I did see that
for Deicide. So if anyone wants to start with Deicide, this is where you go right here. Earaches, the best of Deicide, found at Goodwill. And this contains arguably a strong run from Deicide albums from 2004 to 2010. We got
the era that only 15 people care about.
Now 15 and a half. I think Redemption's cool. I don't know about what's the romantic one where Glenn Benton got divorced?
The romantic one?
Yeah, like he's bemoaning his divorce or something like that.
Where were you, Satan?
Yeah. So that's till death do us part. That was the divorce one. So yeah, big score and a bunch of great stuff like this also in that video. Go check it out. And then finally, thankfully, Brian from Brian Arkham sent me this album a couple weeks ago. So I was already doing some homework. It turned out before Marty pitched Warning of Danger. So this is a bit more speed metal in my opinion. I guess we'll dive into Warning of Danger shortly, but feels a bit faster here on Battle Cry.
All right, Jim,
what's going on, everybody?
How's it going?
It's going good. My listening was a little all over the place this week, but let's just dive right in. Laws Rocket, Annihilation Principle. Love this record. Obviously, Marty remembers the old fire in the whole video, but my actual favorites on this record is actually, yes, it's the power ballad, man. The Omen. That, man, talk about a badass power ballad. That song is amazing. Very heartfelt, great singing, great guitar lines on it. Very, very sad lyrics. Like, you want to get sad, read those lyrics. But it's great if you're in like that kind of mood. So yeah, besides just great thrash, killer, headbanging stuff, when you get to that last song, it's a tearjerker. So I love it. From there, some Summoning, Stronghold. I am forever in Marty's debt for turning me on to Summoning, and I used to tell him all the time. I was like, at all the bands he introduced me to, like, this was my favorite because I just got so into them, so heavy after he played them for me. But yeah, this is definitely one of my favorites by them. Just never gets old. Such a great record. And then I'm going to pick up a couple of things that either I was with Kellen or inspired by Kellen. Was with Kellen when I bought this. I've been jamming on the My Dying Bride some more. And, My Dying Bride was one of those bands that took me a long, long time to get, but this record's stellar. I do think it's a must. I've said that before. And for one that Kellen inspired me to get, his review of Departure Chandelier. Love this. It's still in heavy rotation. This will definitely be on my year-end list. I just don't get tired of it. I love the mix of raw black metal and melodicism. It's a great combination of these guys. Really do it well. Let's see. And a week wouldn't be complete without a little bit of Bolt Thrower. So, yep. Honor, Valor, Pride. This was another one that took me a while to check out, but just because Carl wasn't on it, which was dumb because this record is really great. There's riffs just as amazing on this as any other Bolt Thrower. So, and the guy from Benediction sounds just like Carl, honestly, on this record. So
very similar. Yeah.
It doesn't detract from the record at all. This is cool pressing, has a nice poster in it and stuff. So, yep, that's me this week.
All right. Well, me, obviously, I went down the rabbit hole. So we got the Nightmares EP, which if you're listening to on Spotify, I think was tagged on. Well, it's on the CD. The CD I have has the Nightmares. And, of course, always had to spin this one as well. The Curse. I didn't get around to Battle Cry. And my music listening's all over the place. I'm spiraling into the electronic stuff a bit. I found this band called Uranium. This is Pure Nuclear Death and an Exacting Punishment. Basically, this is industrial metal-ish, but with a heavy-handed shot of noise, which I really got to be in the mood for. I like the more metal tracks on here. I find a lot of these bands do this. There's always bands that are like the metalized industrial. They do a couple of really good songs, and then the rest of the record kind of degenerates into noise or atmospheres, which these struck me well. They're produced well. It's really good stuff. I got these pretty cheap on Sentient Ruin. I think they're like $10 or $12 a piece. They're cheap. And I got a couple other albums from Sentient Ruin. They tend to be leaning into the electronic metal stuff. One is more industrial. I can't remember the name of it. I've tampered with them. I haven't listened to them enough yet to show them. But yeah, Uranium. I think it's a one-person thing. Pretty good stuff if you're into that kind of thing. But tonight we're discussing this classic, Warning of Danger. A little bit about Omen, for those of you who are not familiar. Omen is an American heavy metal band formed in Los Angeles in 1983 by lead guitarist Kenny Powell. The band was formed in Los Angeles by Kenny Powell, previously with the band Savage Grace, and signed on with Metal Blade in 1984, with whom they released their debut Battle Cry. It contained the song The Axeman, which appeared on the soundtrack for the heavy metal themed 2009 video game Brutal Legend. In 85, the second album Warning of Danger followed. In 86, they released The Curse, their first release with major label distribution by Capitol Records in the US. In Japan, the band climbed to number 14 in the Burn charts. Then it goes on. They changed singers, which was a huge mistake. Anyway, yeah, so here we are. Warning of Danger. Logan, since you're new to the Omen thing, we'll start with you.
All right, well, I want to say this was a perfectly timed pick. I've been, getting ready to really break into this album for a little bit. And it probably started back with a stream done on gas masks and hand grenades. I know, Kellen, you were a part of it. The Heavy Metal Island. We were all trapped on an island with 10 of our own hand-picked heavy metal albums. And this one definitely kept coming up. And honestly, it's been a continuous reoccurring theme, I think, in this is corner of the VCLT in general. But after that stream, I finally, broke down and listened to it. And first impression was pretty immediate. I mean, even on the first spin, I was able to pick out tracks that kind of just immediately got stuck in my head and continued to grow after repeated spins. I mean, it was honestly great finally getting the chance to really sit and digest this album, and kind of confirmed everything that I suspected after that first listen. And yeah, this is definitely a great album and one I'm excited to talk about tonight.
Right on. Kellen.
First heard Omen when I was getting more into the American power metal scene. I think you listen to Omen, and by comparison to something like the album covers are a little bit deceiving. I would start to group them in with the bands that lean more to the epic side. It looks like you got these kind of sword and sorcery figures and the album covers, but they don't sound at all like, especially these early albums sound very different than the early Sirathungul Manila Road records. There's all sorts of just California, what's happening in California, specifically a bit more on the underground side of things, that is pouring into this band. And they sounded tighter, sharper, faster than a lot of their peers that were playing in this style. JD Kimball might be, I was trying to think in terms of my favorite American heavy metal vocalists. But I think he might be like the iconic vocalist for this style in that era. I don't know if anyone exemplifies American power metal vocally more than he does. And they're, you know, it's a great band with a bunch of different things going on musically, but their first two records for me, I think, are I know Marty mentioned the first three. I think there's a significant drop off personally once I get.
I love The Curse. I think I had a hard time picking which one to choose for tonight, but anyway, go ahead.
Okay, but yeah, this band I think is situated interestingly between what's happening in terms of a transition into the American heavy metal scene and a time in California's contribution to heavy metal, which sees them sort of blur a few different lines.
Right on. Jim.
First impressions, man, it's all about the vocals. Like, like you nailed it last week, Marty, when you were talking about like just kind of like that. He's got that rough bluesy sound, and I completely agree. And I love that he brings it's such a nice like juxtaposition against like that new wave of British of heavy metal riffing, and with this like gravelly, lower toned voice that just, you sing it from the gut. There's just a lot of, power that comes from that. Not like with like waves of operatic vibrato, but with just like sincerity and feel and power. So yeah, I really think that his vocals for me, like that's what drives the band. You know what I mean? Like, and throughout, like, if you look through my notes for tonight, it's always about like, cool chorus, march on, metal warrior, it's his delivery of all of these, anthemic, metal tropes, that again is just so sincere and memorable. It makes the record fly really quickly for me. So yeah, definitely right on the money, full stop, hearing Omen, what's the winner for me? I could put these guys on like a really awesome playlist with Manila Road and just go back and forth. And I think it will work out just fine. So yeah. A vocally driven American power metal band. Yeah, I'm here for it.
Yeah, this is like Lazarus mentioned in the chat early on. He said that he got this early on when it came out. I did too. Anything that had Metal Blade on it, I bought. If I had the money for it, I bought it. And I might have heard a song of this off of one of the Metal Blade comps back in the day. Loved it. And Warning of Danger in particular, I think of the first three, this is my favorite. I think they're all good. But it is, for me, the songwriting is it feels so effortless and right. Everything sounds completely where it needs to be. And I really like the fact that the band is good with just being a band. Each person is talented in their own realm. They're writing some really catchy stuff, but yet they can step back because they know they've got a powerhouse singing. So you listen to some of these songs, the background is just a simple chord progression with a guy singing his guts out, very emotive singing over the top. And it really speaks to me. I think it's a very warm, even though it's really clean produced, it just has a warmth to it. And it's from JD's voice, I think. But, yeah, I've always been a big fan of this album. The Maidenisms are 100% there. When Kenny and I can't remember the bass player's name off the top of my head. They lock in. There's some busy, more technical rhythms in there. They can really show off, but they always keep it tasteful. And you think LA is known for the glam scene, the Strip and all that stuff, but Metal Blade was located down there as well, and they had their, ear to the ground. You got Omen, and another band early on that sits very well in this realm as well as Lizzie Borden. Listen to The EP and Love You to Pieces in particular, there's a lot of Maiden on those records. And there's a kind of a similar metal blade style. Yeah, right there. That's a great record. That's my favorite Lizzie Borden record. And yeah, there's some glam there, but the Maiden is there, and it's just kind of funny how, Omen and Lizzie Borden, they could have went on tour and it would have worked. But yeah, what I was kind of talking about, I wrote a long, bear with me, it's a long wandering question. So
it's from the heart.
It's from the heart.
You were feeling it.
I was feeling it. Anyway, I'm going to try to get through this without screwing up. Anyway, even though the more things change, the more things stay the same, there's no denying that evolution is a factor when it comes to metal music. Musicians have become more studied in their instruments and craft. They have pushed the limits of their ability as the years go on, and much like the Ulcerate album we covered last week, the music becomes more complex, more challenging, more of everything. Then there are albums from yesteryear like Warning of Danger, pure metal to the core, emotive, powerful. It is created and played by 4 people who all share a common goal, heavy metal. Sometimes simple, sometimes a touch of technical flair erupts, but the band never loses sight of a smooth and always welcoming churn. The band can unite to lay down a simplistic chord progression and rely on the refined talent of their singer to take the song where it needs to go every single time. Have we at times grown too far out of the realm of simplicity, yet still engaging songcraft? In this technically gifted modern world, has some of the music lost its soul? There was a lot of thing to say one simple question. Sorry. Kellen. I couldn't. It was in my head today earlier. Perfect. Then I sat down. It's like, this is a shit mess. And I didn't have time to fix it. So
I got a lot to say. You're going to listen to what I have to say here. Yeah. I guess it's interesting because I hear that question, and I'm trying to think of other bands, now that are playing in that style, right? Like, I'm rocking, the Megaton Sword is a band that is 100% dependent on a vocalist.
Yep. 100%. That's a great example.
But like there are a lot of bands, I think we would at least agree here, who are trying to play simple songs or well sort of practiced style that aren't complex, that aren't technical, but we've all kind of heard them before and they lack the same impact or soul, right? And I think this kind of songwriting, it's difficult to sort of capture lightning in a bottle like this. I think a genre probably has a window of opportunity, and after that, you have to take it someplace else. So I'm trying to think of bands who are playing in American power metal. It really has a decade. You have maybe it starts to fizzle out at the early part of the 90s, and it just sort of disappears. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But I also do think there was a certain kind of heartfelt simplicity that was straightforward about this American heavy metal songwriting that, you get to like, I think like Virgin Steel's later records get a little bit more proggy. It's a band that diversifies, and that's kind of their best work comes later on in their career, as opposed to a lot of other bands who kind of suffered through the 90s and it fizzled out. So I really think a genre like this has a limited sort of opportunity, and you have key ingredients. I agree with the sort of premise, though, is bare bones sort of songwriting style, core ingredients, and they get it right. They don't overcomplicate it, and they don't need to. There's just no excess or need to impress on this record. And one of the best things about American power metal, we've talked about it several times on this show, is how it differentiated itself from a lot of different other traditional heavy metal styles. It just felt so much more sort of blue collar. Yep. It was this great sort of inheritance from the new wave of British heavy metal that kept on to the street aspect of it and pulled it into the American side of things. And this band nails it. There's others like it, but I think more than anything, to answer your question more concisely, I actually think genres do end up exhausting what we think as whole, like sincere or soulful or, you know, unpracticed or unstudied, just from the heart kind of songs. At some point, you lose that currency.
Yeah.
And you have to try and find somewhere else to take it. I'd much rather celebrate this era than necessarily critique those that come after.
Right on. Logan, well said.
Yeah, well said for sure. I think I looked at this question more as like looking at metal overall and all of its different subgenres overall, you know, because I think you could argue the same, you could make the same statement about like early death metal, early thrash, early black metal, like that there's such, you know, a bit more of that simplistic, just, you know, kids creating the canvas, kids create, you know, young people just making it up and just doing what works and what was around them. And that definitely includes the cultural sphere of the era. I mean, like, it definitely sounds 80s. It definitely sounds 80s. And you can't recreate that in the same way. It can't, that sound can't be genuine in 2024. I mean, the biker, it's definitely blue collar. Definitely sounds like a biker bar, but also inspired by like 1980s, 1970s, like just fantasy and action movies and films and stuff. And I don't think you can recreate, as I think Kellen said, that lightning in a bottle in this era and make it sound genuine. Because I think if anyone were to even try, we're all going to be like, okay, well, there's the Omen clone going back to Omen. So it's gone. It's gone essentially. But the spirit still lives on. I mean, like, you know, I think metal reinvents itself every time and with each subsequent generation. And I kind of wanted to bring, you know, some examples with that. So this is like, you know, metal can go back to those simplistic days, you know, and it's kind of in us as fans to either see it as genuine or to see it as just, you know, being a copycat. And I could see how if you were around in the 80s, you know, something like Eternal Champion might be just creating something that's already been done and feeling more phoned in or like a copy of a copy than something genuine. But when I first heard this, I was like, man, this is simple. This is focused on like that epic riff writing, you know, foremost, and like the vocal performance is also killer. So I think this is a modern succession for American heavy metal. Like we'll talk about the whole power metal thing later on, I think, but American heavy metal, and then to kind of mention death metal because that was the first direction I went, like with this question. Death metal was really cannibalizing itself and really had gone. I think it reached its natural progression and peak in the 2000s. And I think in 2008, you could definitely see a restart button, you know, hit. And kind of stealing a page from Kellen's book here, but both of these albums came out in 2008. We got Decrepit Births, Diminishing Between Worlds, fast, technical, just a, you know, wizardry of fast riffs, kind of clean, everything 1,000, you know, miles an hour right at you. And then boom, this comes out. Dead Congregation, Graves of the Archangels, just bringing it back to this 90s darkness and really just resimplifying everything and kind of.
And there's songs there. That's one thing the Dead Congregation gets right is their songs, and there's a sound and there's songs. Whereas a lot of this is old guy screaming at the cloud shit, but a lot of the new modern death metal bands trying to sound old, they focus on a sound. They focus on a sound and forget about writing songs that are interesting to me anyway.
But I think it's now this sound just as much as it is the sound from like the 90s. Like,
yeah,
I mean, this and other bands that started to come out in like the late 2000s and early 2010s, I think really revitalized it by going back to simple.
Yep.
And I think the same can be said for heavy metal bands in the traditional heavy metal scene. But they will never have that same feel that an album like Omen and this one will, you know.
Right. Well said as well. Jim, what are your thoughts on this convoluted question?
Well, I think everybody, pretty much answered it pretty well, and I'm not going to deviate too far from it. This is definitely a snapshot in time. I don't think lyrically that if a band was to come out now and have the same sort of refrains, like cyborg lust, I don't know that it would go over as well today, but at the same time, I mean, it's listening to this and appreciating it for when it came out and what it is, and for what came after, like what it inspired to come after. It's great, and it has to be respected. And I would say that, like, one of the cool things about metal for me is that it's the only other genre of music, and you guys are gonna have me for saying this, is it's like country. Like it can sound old and people still buy the old stuff. You know what I mean? Like a metal is anachronistic like that. Like the different styles of metal just keep going on, even though it branches out and changes and evolves. To your point, Marty, like there's still bands like the ones who Logan just held up that are celebrating these old sounds. And so I think that musically, this same style not only can continue, but is continuing and will continue. I do think that the only difference that needs to be made isn't even really like the themes or anything. I think you can even stay there and make it fresh, but just in the way that you present the lyrics. Like, if you can find some way to kind of twist on them, whatever that may be, making them more poetic or something. I don't have the answer to that. If I was, I'd be in an epic heavy metal band. But I do think that if you can find a way to sort of, you can carry these sounds forward, because that's part of what metal is. Metal doesn't, any diehard fan will tell you metal doesn't die. True fans listen to the old stuff, the mid period, the new stuff. We listen to it all. We find something in every era or every decade that's worth listening to. So it's going to continue, but for this particular style, which is pure heavy metal without asterisks, without a prefix or a suffix, like it's just heavy metal. Maybe put American power metal there if you want. But this kind of like definitive kind of format of just what metal is, if you're going to play it in the modern day, and I think that, if you can just find some way to kind of like, lyrically capture the listener in a way that hasn't been done before, you can still be, sword and sorcery, you can still be fantasy, you can still have, the great new wave of British heavy metal riffs, bluesy style vocals, all that kind of stuff, but it has to be presented with a slightly different way to make it, I think, palatable for even old heads like myself, like just give us a little bit of a twist there, to keep it fresh. So have we lost something? That was another part of your question. I don't know, that's really tough. That one I'm kind of, I straddle the fence on, because it definitely, when I was, a young man coming up, there was definitely like a sort of mysticism and, that came along with being a fan of heavy metal that, is a lot harder. That it's harder to kind of get yourself into that mindset today, not just being old like I am, but also because like there's so much information out there right now at our fingertips. It's really hard to kind of develop a mystique. It's, you want to know anything, you can find out instantly, not just, factually, but you can have AI give you what its thoughts are on it. So, I think that's a question better posed to maybe, Logan or Kellen and what their thoughts are. Like, has there been an era in their lifetimes where metal still had that mystery, or has it always been sort of like in your face because you could come around the corner and know what was behind the curtain? I don't know, but yeah, I have a struggle answering that part of the question because I still can get in that zone where I feel it, but it doesn't happen as often. It's a lot harder to get there now. But yeah, I mean, I hope that answers both parts of your questions. I'll try as best I could. So.
Right on. Well, to answer my own question, I mean, this is something I think about on occasion. And the ulcerate, that's why I picked this record, because I wanted something that was, the antithesis to that record, which is kind of what I was pointing at, although I think ulcerate kind of gets it right. There's emotion at the core of that stuff. And I just think a lot of these bands nowadays, whether it's, the new wave of traditional heavy metal, that stuff is circled back around and they're paying homage to the old days, but yet there's still so much technical advancement in the playing, in the production sound. It still sounds modern. I think I think of bands like Horrendous, or I think of bands like Tomb Mold. Great bands. They're really good. I listen to this stuff and I hear a death metal band trying to move the ball down the field and do something a little bit different. And it just strikes me as they're trying to reach out to be something they're not quite yet, without really worrying about this is tough. I don't want to say shitty things that aren't, because these bands are good and I own stuff by all these bands. So I just think if Omen, the style, when that album came out, when Warning of Danger came out, there was a lot of bands, even on their own label, that were in this realm. Okay. You got the Fates Warning, who were much like, you could tell it was another Metal Blade band, but they were more mystical. You had Lizzie Borden, which was a lot like this band, but they were a little bit more glam and shock rock. If the way that was continued on for 40 years, it would have been, at the time, all these genres kind of wear themselves out. And, these bands kind of go away and people forget about them, which is, I've talked about this record. I mentioned J.D. Kimball. He is an amazing singer. I don't want people to forget, because this guy's dead. That sucks. Cancer sucks. But his talent, he's kind of like an underground Dio, kind of a similar caliber of voice, bluesy, raspy. But if this style of metal endured 40 years, it was kind of towards the end getting tired then. It'd be really tired now. So evolution is necessary, but I just think all of these bands that are going so complicated and trying to reach in to do these things that try to sandwich other things in with metal, and instead of working on a core sound that's catchy and memorable, they're trying to increase their creativity. I think after trying to process a lot of those bands, going back to this era, it's where I came from, so I have a nostalgic connection, but it makes it relevant again to me. Not that it ever really died in its relevance, but I just think, stuff like this, it just makes even more sense today. And it kind of makes me long for the time where bands just worked with their talents. Get yourself a great singer, instead of practicing your guitar scales and doing all this crazy shit, which is impressive. And yeah, everybody likes the shock and awe. Everybody likes the spectacle, but who wants to sit down and really connect with the spectacle? I mean, I would rather listen to an album full of songs that I can sing along to, or, connect on some emotional level, other than a lot of crazy, yep, old man yells at band. Exactly. It's exactly what I'm doing. But, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. So has it lost its soul? I don't think metal has lost its soul. I think there's some elements of it that have, but I also think, so many years behind us, bands are still, I think the way metal sounds and what we all expect from it can act as an anchor. It's kind of a creative anchor, and it can pull you down. If you follow the sounds too much, you're seen as not doing enough. If you go too crazy, how much re-listenability do you have? So it's like a fine line, and where do you go from there? I don't know. I don't know if I've answered my own stupid question, but here we go. Anybody have anything to say before we move on?
I mean, I think I agree, though. The transition between the two records was what made this so perfect. Like, if I had been listening to this kind of songwriting over, like, whatever, we'd listen to a Kiss record after this, and then listen to a Sabbath record, like, and then Jim comes along, gives me Ulcerate. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. You know what I mean? Like, it was the transition that I think worked really well.
Yeah.
And making a point of, like, you can still create a level of emotional engagement with a record with one that is on the opposing side in terms of complexity. So,
yep. All right. We got through that. Discuss the musicality and composition of Warning of Danger. Logan, we'll start with you.
All right. So before kind of diving into the whole musicality and composition thing, I want to tackle the whole it's power metal. So I don't know why I hit a sticking point with that. And I'm going to blame it's all European power metal's fault, especially around the 2000s era. And, you know, we'll bring this up again. It just doesn't sound like power metal to me. It doesn't have the grandiose, the cleanliness, the even the speed overall.
Let me blow your mind,
like,
Logan. Let me blow your mind.
Well, it was just, you know, like power metal. I'm like, we're elves and we're dwarves and we're hobbits and we're prancing through a forest on epic quest. This album, you're this character right here, and then look, there's a big boob chick next to you, and you're like, you know, you're probably gonna die tomorrow, but you know what? Fuck it. Like, let's go have a beer in the meat hall over there, and you know, fuck yeah. But there's something different. This doesn't sound like power metal to me.
It's U.S. power, like metal. Well, the first two Metal Church albums are also power metal. Hate to tell you, the first three records are. They're a power metal band. They are a U.S. power metal. It's different.
See, this is what I'm like. I didn't know there was the U.S. power metal tangent. Like, are we talking Manila Road? Are we throwing?
They're epic metal.
Ungol in there.
Virgin Steel would be a U.S. power metal band in my eyes.
I would agree there.
Go ahead.
I would think Vicious Rumors with like digital.
Yeah, they're more power.
Like, that sounds like power metal. I'm good with that.
Okay, well, and the Logan and in the private chat here, I'm going to give you a couple of links. There's a really good sort of comprehensive guide that goes through the history for you. But yeah, I mean, I think because Omen, you know, formed previously the guitarist came from Savage Grace, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, like I mean, that's another great example of an American power metal band. So, yeah.
Yep.
Anyway,
continue on. Logan.
Riot's Thundersteel, I'd say that's power metal, but like the earlier Riot's not. You know, for the most part. I haven't heard every single Riot album, but the ones I have. But no, yeah. So that's my thing with that term. So I like approaching this. I was thinking just epic heavy metal, like epic metal. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me, and all centered around that vocal performance. It is definitely one of the most, you know, unique and dynamic performances I think I've heard on an album, especially from like, I mean, especially when you compare it to like modern bands and stuff. I think Kimball's vocals definitely are front and center, and definitely the first thing I noticed, like his vocal style, he keeps very much in like a similar, like he's not jumping all over the range, but he has so much power behind the range that he's in. It just it's the sweet spot. He stays in his sweet spot, and you know, no one else that I can think of off the top of my head is quite like him. Maybe the closest could be the guy from Warlord, that Deliver Us album. Like that's I think that's a good complimentary album to this one, Deliver Us. But man, he croons, he shouts, he goes from being like a gruff biker guy to like an, you know, like a
soulful
warrior
crooner
on the battlefield. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't deviate, but when he really like steps up the power and starts to layer, the song just is all the better for it. Man, just thinking of some examples, like the ending of Ruby Eyes of the Serpent, how they close off Red Horizon, and just the whole final song, Hell's Gates, man. He sounds awesome. Am I weird to think that there's almost a little punk like kind of vibe in his vocals? I don't know. Like some of it made me think of Misfits for some reasons, like the Static Age kind of stuff. But maybe that could be off base. But so yeah, vocals are the standout and really what carries the whole album. Instrumentally, though, the band is also locked in and creates a very interesting and layered backdrop for the stories that Kimball screams about over top. I mean, the pacing too is just impressive with this band. They can open up like kind of quiet and slow and almost ballad-esque, and then on a dime just go into like this speed metal section that really catches you off guard but also seems seamless at the same time. So I think the dynamic between the guitar especially, which is, I think it's a bluesy performance overall, the dynamic between the guitar and Kimball's vocals, I think really create the atmosphere of the album. And I think it's a dark atmosphere and a mystical one, I would definitely say. The drums and the bass are both also very serviceable. I mean, they kind of get overshadowed, but I think that's kind of what they're there for. They're not trying to take away from the performance of either Kimball or the lead guitar. So on further listens, I will continue probably to unlock what they're all doing. But I definitely love the performance of every single member here. And then to kind of like close with the flow of the album overall, man, it's perfectly constructed. It's separated into two halves, 4 songs in the beginning, then like these 2 instrumentals, and then 4 songs at the end, and it just flows perfectly between like slower, more mid-paced tracks to like the epic, more speed metal oriented ones, and then a ballad like on each side as well. And it's 40 minutes long, but it feels like 25 to 30. And God, it was so easy to just click with this thing. Like, how with albums there's sometimes that like awkward getting to meet you phase. Not with this one. This one was immediate. It was like, greeting an old friend at a bar, just immediately clicking with someone. So it was, great listen and well done album for sure.
Right on. Jim.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, Logan, you kind of said it all there, but I'll try to find something else to riff off of.
Sorry.
No, that wasn't a dig, man. That was, I'm just saying, like, you covered all the bases, so kudos to you for that. Yeah, man. Everything Logan said, I concur with. The riffs, the vocals, the lyrics, the themes that I mentioned earlier, for this time period were kind of perfect. This is, start at the beginning, play it all the way through, heavy metal. There's no stinkers on this. Marty was talking about, how Dead Congregation writes songs. It wasn't just about like harkening back to dark metal of the 90s. They actually wrote songs and wasn't just concerned about a sound. And that's what these guys were definitely concerned about. I can see them with the brevity of the songs, but with like the sense of each riff and how it's put into place within each song. There was care taken. There was definitely like, okay, this riff's not going to work. This riff will work. Because there's a very steady sort of flow for each tune. And it's not to say that I don't like it when things are abrupt. I mean, I love extreme metal. I love thrash. I love death metal. I love all that stuff, tons of time changes, that kind of thing. But, for Omen, this is like, riding into battle music. This is, charging in on horseback. This is spears and shields at the ready. And, that sort of anthemic, from the soul, pumping you up, powerful, sort of like, mental preparation for sword wielding, this is the album for that, you're not quite in for the kill yet where you're ready to, throw on some venom or whatever, you're riding into that, you're preparing for it. It's like the scene in Conan where they're getting ready for, all those guys to attack and they're setting up all the traps and everything, that's when you're listening to Omen. uh, but yeah, man, music, and that's definitely kind of the thought that kept returning to me was like, yeah, man, there's care in the songwriting here. They want you to come away from each track remembering it. That's why the choruses are repeated in the ways that they are. The vocal rhythms in the chorus are very memorable. Now, I will ding them slightly. There's a couple times where they kind of do it a little too much. Uh, which one was that here on Don't Fear the Night? I love how Kimball's like, "Don't fear the night." It's great, but at the end, like he does it like 12 times, and it's like I wish it was just like 6. Cut it off a little bit, but it's again, it just harkens back to what I think their approach was. You're going to walk away from this record and it's going to be playing in your head, and I don't think it was from like a kind of a, and this may be naive of me to say, but like from a commercial standpoint, like let's create an earworm and make millions of dollars. I just think it was more like, let's write a song that sticks with people, that stands with them. We keep mentioning that Omen has a lot of feel in their music, so and I think that goes hand in hand. I feel like because there was a sincere like approach to metal that they wanted it to like kind of touch your soul and to stay with you, after subsequent listens, and everything sort of dovetails into that. The riffs, the melody lines of the guitars, the really great bass playing. I mean, I definitely shout out to Hell's Gates, man. That little bass line at the beginning thing that introduces that song, it's just chef's kiss, amazing. It's like a simple kind of a chord progression, picked bass, but it is very memorable. It stands out. It sounds really, really good, and that's just what it is. It's just like it just sounds right. These guys are in the pocket the whole time. So yeah, musicality, composition, right on for these guys.
Right on. Kellen.
Yeah, I kind of love this band for the same reason that I really love Sin After Sin. Like this band sneaks the blues in for a metal record in 1984 in a way that I think is kind of subtle. I think there's enough of this record. But the first thing that I always associated Omen with is the level, like how tight the playing is. A lot of the bands that were in this style are kind of sloppy. And that was kind of endearing about them. But you listen to this record, the instrumental track on this. I mean, that totally. So I don't know what it stands for. VBP or VBP. Yeah.
No idea.
I have no idea what it stands for, but that reminds me of like a Hellstar track, which is a band that I also associate with like really sort of technically proficient American power metal in terms of guitar work. But to Jim and Logan's point, there's other tracks like that on this album that are far more in like a mid-paced, early epic heavy metal sound. So there's a certain kind of proficiency that they have pulling from American epic heavy metal, like the album cover, the lyrical content. The March On is totally a "we love being metal people" anthem, right?
Yeah.
Like that is like that's just talking to the crowd, like a little sort of brotherhood sort of song. But some of the tracks here definitely sort of transport Maiden's kind of galloping style to an American landscape. Like you can hear the influence that Maiden has on them, but In 1984, I think is Battle Cry. 85 is Warning of Danger. Am I right about that?
Warning of Danger is 85 and Battle Cry is 84. Yep. And then 86 is The Curse.
Right. I mean, they're just knocking them out, but I can't sort of separate this band from a kind, I don't know if you want to call it American power metal or speed metal or thrash. What's happening in California, I think, is also pushing their riffing style into something much faster. And that clearly separates them from just being another Maiden sort of wannabe. There's a greater sense of aggression. And when you tie in sort of this street blues biker gang, kind of vibe, it's a special identity. I do just want to go spend a little bit more time with Kimball. To your point, we're going to talk about production quality here, but the fact that he sings at a much lower register throughout the most of this record, I think also contributes to that sort of what do you want to call it? Warmth or mystique or persona, but his vocal register and character feels to me completely unpracticed. If you told me that he just was someone they saw at a show who was singing along with the band and they pulled him into the studio and he got in front of a mic and performed, I would totally believe you. There's a certain kind of just natural talent that feels with not curated or coached. It just feels like that kind of delivery is something that you can't necessarily teach. I don't know if that's true. For all I know, he spent a decade in vocal lessons. But every time I listen to him sing, that's what I come away with. And the fact that this band captures the sort of raw precision and that kind of unpracticed ability that just comes natural to them. You mentioned this record unfolds with the kind of ease. Logan mentioned how he listened to it. It's 40 minutes long. It seems like it's 25. I had the same feeling. This record just feels so natural.
Yep.
And I think that gives them sort of a live kind of character in terms of the performance of the record. And I something about that it always stays with me. I think it's also sort of a style thing for American power metal. It just feels completely from the heart. To your point in your question, I think the songwriting and the musicality, there's something it's difficult to express, but Kimball, his voice probably exemplifies that most for me.
Right on. Well, for me, musicality and composition, it's a mature album. It's a very mature album, and the flow, the dynamics, they nail it every time on here. I've often throughout the week, I'm listening to this. I'm like, okay, Maiden-isms are there. This is the U.S. There seemed like Killers inspired this. I think I listen to this. I think of Killers by Iron Maiden, and then as the week went on, I'm like, no, it's the debut Maiden, where you've got, you mentioned more of a kind of a punk vibe on. I don't know if I get a lot of punk in this, but early Maiden, I do get a little bit of a punk to it, mainly Di'Anno's voice. But the first Maiden, you've got bangers up with, some ballad-esque tunes, the same with this one. So if I was going to say, they're Maiden in the way that the first album by Maiden, with Di'Anno singing, you got a guy who's kind of a bluesy street brawler, shouting out tuneful stuff. But the band knows the strength. None of these guys are slouches. The thing I think is really great is they know they've got a great singer, and they prop him up and they write music around him. They say, okay, JD's going to come in. He's going to deliver this he's going to deliver this melody line here. We're just going to step back with a chord progression, a simple chord progression. And when he's done singing for the music break, we're going to rip out, rip into some Maiden stuff, and I like the fact that Jody Henry, the bass player, and Kenny Powell, they're locked in. Jody's not doing a lot of stuff playing off of. He's basically lockstep with the riffs, whether it's a simple chord progression or the more technical speedy stuff, he's there note for note. And the way the bass is produced, it's so clean and so in its own field, you can hear everything he does. So he's a good player, because I mean, it's easy to hide behind distortion, whether you're playing guitar, whether you're playing bass. I think it's very ballsy for a guy to have such a clean, pristine bass tone and step up there note for note with a guitar player. I think that's badass. And I think it's also, you listen to Ruby Eyes and Don't Fear the Night. That's kind of like a 1-2 punch on this album for me. Then they get into that VBP. There's no singing on that. So there's a little bit of a tasteful intro and then it goes into it. And there's some squirrely, weird riffs that break off into these really cool melody lines. They know what they're doing. They know they're a good band. The trio that make the music here know they're good, but they know enough to get out of the singer's way too. And I think that's really cool. As far as songwriting and composition goes, they really, they nail it here on that. And I do like the pacing of the record. They drop the ballad right at the right time. They put that instrumental, they left you headbanging at the end of side 1. I mean, what a great place after the ballad to put that busy instrumental. And then they just, the rest of the album, it rages except for, you get to Hell's Gates and there's just
Epic closer.
It doesn't need to be a banger. You've kind of left us, satiated in that department throughout the album. So I really like putting this record on and just not realizing time for a while. Just, oh, it's this song. Yes. Cool. Oh yeah. This song. Awesome. It's just a reminder. It's just a well-written album that every song offers something of worth. So yeah, I would say the musicality and composition on this is great. They did a great job. And yeah, let's talk about the production. Jim.
Yeah. Going perfectly along, with the vocals is, the warmth of the overall sound of the record. This is, a lot of the records, if you buy an early press from the 80s, and we all know they're kind of thin sometimes, and sometimes that thinness is a detriment to the sound of the sound of the recording. It doesn't have like the bottom end that we're kind of become accustomed to in the modern era. I don't think it matters how thin the pressing is for this record. I mean, there's so much warmth in the vocals, the presentation of the guitar, the recording of the drums, that it would overcome that. When I say bass, I don't mean like a booming bass. I just mean like a lower frequency overall that is somehow soothing, while even though you're listening to some truly powerful heavy metal. Yeah, maybe it's soothing to me because I'm typically blaring my ears out to, immolation and suffocation or something like that. I don't know, but for me, this is very, relaxing metal that I can listen to, during the course of the workday, not be distracted, and you kind of get things going. And I love that. I love that there's something, there's music like this, from that era that I can put on. And I can just feel good about it, just feel good and not get bogged down. And I really, lay that at the feet of, not just the performances, but also, the choices made in the studio that resulted, in this sort of like a brown sound. I didn't say brown note, the brown but it just feels like it has this kind of like a tan tone, if you will, that just kind of, it's easy for me. It's easy on the ear. So, some of that is recording to 1/4-inch tape, which was the thing back then. Some of that is just like the general style. I mean, I totally get what you're saying, Marty, with I think these guys definitely liked Killers. I do think that there's, at least from a production standpoint, as well as some of the more Iron Maidenisms like you hear in like the first track and stuff like that. There's some Killers love on here, but that is so not a bad thing.
Oh no,
that is
not a complaint at all.
Definitely a great thing. And, and as, don't get me wrong. I love the Maiden years. I've got, the 80 through 88 box set sitting right behind me, for Maiden, but but I really do love the warmth of the first two albums, you know, of Killers and the debut. And I feel like, you know, this is an American progression of that production style, you know, where, you know, it's going to sound, you know, I think Kellen said earlier, like, you know, it sounds like it's from the streets, and it does. It sounds like it's from the streets, but yet it has this true, you know, heavy metal, like, you know, mysticism going through it. You know, you can kind of like, you know, chuckle a little bit at, you know, Termination, and it's, you know, it's Terminator influenced lyrics. But at the same time, it's like awesome. You got to think like, you know, this record came out when that movie came out. Like these guys jumped right on it. Like, this movie's great. Let's write a song about it. You know? And I mean, I love it. I mean, every time that track comes on, I'm like, Cyborg Lost. I just love it, man. I love the crazy John Carpenter-esque, like, you know, cheesy synth intro, the whole thing. It's fantastic. And, you know, that being like the kind of like the one moment in the album where they kind of break out of that sort of like warm, you know, guitar, bass, drums tonality with some like, you know, sick Casio electronics, you know. But I wouldn't change it. It's great, and it kind of shows like these guys aren't afraid to throw in a little variety and a little bit of spice. So yeah, man, nothing much more to say about it. Oh, I did want to mention also that I do think that despite where the vocals and the drums and guitar sit, the bass actually sits a little, it's higher range, you know. It cuts through. It's very clean. To Marty's point, it's very clean, and but that's great. It kind of, you know, it prevents like the overall sound from being muddy, having this really sharp bass tone. And so I think that was a really cool choice too, you know. And somehow it's kind of like that's like the hub, if you will, the hub, if you will, of the wheel or something. Lost it there. But it's everything kind of like branches out from that bass sound. It's sort of at the center, you know, and a very cool, you know, EQing of that bass going on there. So yeah, whether by accident or not, I think it's a standout.
All right, Kellen.
So, yeah, I just wanted to go back quickly to the songwriting, I guess, and this will tie into the production. To me, that like center of gravity warmth, right, where the weight of the record presides, is a little bit low, like somewhere mid-range lower. His vocals, JD, it's like the dynamic shifts kind of gradually unveil themselves. There's not a lot of stop and start on this record, and he just, when he sings, kind of pours like a little bit of milk and honey into those transitions. Mm-hmm. It just smooths everything over. I think, to your point about the bass tone, to me it's interesting where they chose to kind of double track Kenny's guitars, and when it feels like it's just a 3-piece instrumentally playing. There's times here on this record where I feel like you can just hear a single guitar and that bass is given more sort of room in the mix. The other part of it, and this is classic like 80s production, the deeper you go into the drum kit, the more it's felt rather than heard, which is just something that, you know, to whatever your mileage may vary there, but it's one of those records you turn up and you get like the lower reaches of your you know, stereo. You can feel that bottom end more than like precisely hear it. The last piece I'll jump in here with is, we talked a little bit sort of on the like street atmospherics. I really like Kenny's lead guitar tone on this record.
Yeah.
When this needs to be sharp and piercing, as much as we think of it as a warm record, his lead guitar work, I think, is a perfect sort of marriage to the rest of the sound. I think it sounds precise and it bites in a way that I think is incredibly articulate for such a sort of blue collar record. Anyway, every time he'd get a chance to really solo on this, not only do I love his soloing style, it's always going places, you know, it works well. But I just think it pierces through in the right way over the riff and over the bass tone. And It's just something I wanted to point out is when he gets a chance to solo on this record, I wish more guitar solos had this sort of voicing. I guess is the way I'd like to say that. So I think that was also a commendable effort for the mix.
Right on. Logan, have you gone yet?
No, not yet.
Talk a lot. I have to use the little boys' room. I'll be right back. There's water.
My first sentence was going to be, I'm going to be quick on this one, but I'll try to be verbose. Let's see.
You can do it.
All right. As I'm pontificating on how the people push knobs and stuff, now I'll be a little quicker than that. Yeah, so I guess to kind of first mention for the production, it has to be mentioned that I'm listening to it on Spotify over a Bluetooth headset. This is not the same as listening to it on a record pressed in 1985 on thin 100 gram, 80 gram vinyl. So, and I don't know, maybe I'm listening to like a remastered version, but I thought the production was perfect for what it was. It sounded warm, as has been mentioned before, but it also sounded clear for all the different, layers instrumentally, with the focal point being Kimball. He is definitely out front, the leader of the charge, the main guy on horseback leading the pack. And I guess if I were to maybe make a complaint, like when that's happening, it is tougher to hear maybe what the bass is doing and what the drums are doing. But I feel like the point of the production is not for you to hear what they're all doing at that point. And as I think you said, Kellen, you're feeling it. You're feeling the gallop. You're feeling the march towards where they're going with, the vocals and the guitars kind of leading the charge. I do like how you can tell when, the guitar layering comes in. It's pretty obvious, and you can really kind of make a distinguishing point between these two separate guitar lines kind of on top of each other to add a little bit more, heft to a section of the song or a range to where the track is going. Yeah, I really have no complaints with the production at all. Everything sits nice and neat with the vocals at the forefront as the figurehead, and it really all comes together to create a cohesive, dark and mystical atmosphere that kind of sells the album overall and makes it a unique piece of metal that it is. So, good production.
Right on. Let me look real quick. Additional notes. Hold on. Let me do this, and go to recorded at El Dorado in Hollywood, California, and track record in LA, California. Mastered at Capitol Records. Co-produced by Omen. Okay. For me, this album sounds. It is a warm production. It is a production where the band sounds like themselves. I mean, there was a moment in Metal Blade's history where they would send a lot of they'd fly Fate's Warning out to go record with Bill Metoyer. A lot of bands were funneled through there. So there was the Metal Blade sound. It was kind of Bill's studio sound, Fate's Warning, all the other bands that went there. I'm drawing a blank right now. But I think Omen sounds like Omen here. And I think it's a clean production. It's a warm production, and it's a smart production. It's smart because they don't have two guitarists live. And this is a band that played live a lot. They were kind of theatric on the first in the Battle Cry. They'd go up, JD'd go up, and they'd all have armor and shit on. It was kind of cool. So they didn't overpack this record. They go up. It sounds like something they could pull off live. It sounds like an amp with Kenny's tone in it. The bass is pretty clean. It's kind of an ambiguous, sound. It doesn't sound like anybody in particular. It's a clean higher end bass tone. It's just a mix and a production meant to be recreated live, which is smart. A lot of bands today can't say that they can do that. Of course, now with plugins and stuff, you can go up there with no amps and just run through your laptop if you want to and get, the 5150 amp pack or the, whatever. So I think it's a good production. I've always liked it. When I hear it, it sounds like Omen to me. here. Oh, this is warning of danger. Here we go. And the curse even has that as well. A big fan of both of them. But yeah, production's good. Least favorite songs, Jim.
All right, so man, for me, it's March On, Metal Warrior, dude. I love that. Uh, Anybody watch the show know anything that, like, you know, anthemically calls out metal and metal warriors that we are. Like, I love that. It's the quickest way to my heart in a song. So that one is my favorite. I just love that song, and it's all about, JD's delivery. March on, Metal Warrior. I mean, it's just like, it's so meaningful and sincere. Like, he really means it. I'm gonna march, dude. I'm with you. Love it, dude. So yeah, I mentioned Termination. Yeah, I through all the cheese, man, I still think it's awesome, man. I love that song. I just, every time it comes on, it's like my ears perk up, and I'm super stoked about it. I also got to give props to the closer, man. Hell's Gates, again, that super awesome intro, the cool slower tempo, feel the fire, lick your body clean. I mean, what a line, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yep.
pretty sweet. That said, I mean, there is no stinkers on this album for me, man. Ruby Eyes of the Serpent, Don't Fear the Night, Make Me Your King, I Could Rule an Iron Hand. I mean, it's like, this is like what? It's like 38 minutes. I mean, they didn't have time to write a bad song. They got in and got out,
Yep.
And if it went longer, it may have been too long. But as it stands, no, I'm not going to say there's a bad song on this. But those are my favorites for sure. March on, Metal Warrior, Termination, and Hell's Gates.
Right on, Kellen. Muted.
There we go. This is probably one of my favorite, heavy metal records of all time. So there's nothing here that I dislike at all. The first time I heard Termination, I was like, did he just say cyborg lust? Like, I had that immediate reaction, like, what is he talking about? But it's as cheesy that song potentially could be perceived. It always just makes me laugh. It's perfect. And just a little bit of like camp there and having a good time, I think, works for this record. Same thing with March On. I had the opener, like when he jumps into "And You Shall Fall" and the riff takes off every single time. It's like game on.
Yeah.
Game on. It's just, they build that up, and he just launches into that note, and it just takes off. The record for me doesn't fail after that. It's a great setup. Even like the instrumental, it's a cool opportunity for them to kind of flex a little bit, and it's well suited. When you listen to it on the vinyl record, you flip it over, and side B opens with the instrumental before Termination.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're streaming it, it has the same kind of seamlessness to it. This, when I was listening to this week, I was called in to work several times to work in our receiving department. So I was throwing around all these boxes, just had my headphones on. No one was in there. I listened to this over and over and over. Like, I was all by myself. And I couldn't tell you how many times in a row I listened to it. It felt that it just seamlessly, I could listen, without hesitation, without restraint. It sounded like it was 20 minutes long. And I couldn't get enough of it. It's just one of those records that has so many, to Marty's point early on, the simplicity of it every single time, I think, is one of the more endearing qualities. And the songwriting here, there's no shortcomings at all.
Right on, Logan.
All right, yeah, man, that's a tough one. I mean, this album, all the songs work perfectly, and it really isn't a bad one. I guess if I were to lodge like one little nitpick, and this probably comes from me only having streamed it, and not done it as a record. It's just those two instrumentals back to back always, threw me off. I always felt like a little too long without hearing Kimball's majestic vocals coming at me, And but then the truth is that after premonition or whatever ends, and termination happens, then the vocals hit that much better. The song hits that much harder because of those instrumentals being where they are. And VVP is definitely epic and a great tour de force of what they can do instrumentally. And I think because of how distinct Kimball's vocals are, the band actually needed that break right there in the middle, just so they could be them without Kimball, For the rest, on my first spin through, the songs that really stuck out with me, and I think are still probably my favorite to this day, are "Don't Fear the Night" and "Make Me Your King." Just that slow burning start of both of these songs into like these epic and really haunting choruses, and they both feel so thematic. You can kind of visualize both tracks, like "Don't Fear the Night" is just beautiful and haunting in like an Evil Dead kind of way, and then "Make Me Your King" just makes me think of Conan and like this warrior who has to wear the the crown on furrowed brow, kind of character. Is just epic.
Yeah.
And then Jim did a great job of describing, and Kellen too, of describing "Terminate." I love that song. Cyborg lust programmed to terminate. Right, and this, as you said, the same year that Terminator came out. Man, more metal bands should do that these days.
More Terminator songs, please.
Yes. Where you just find a good movie that just came out and just make a song about it. Everyone still is writing songs about Terminator in the 80s, like let's find, there's good stuff coming out.
There should be a power metal band,
Maybe.
a European power metal band that sings about exclusively Terminator mythos.
Like references and stuff. And is there a band like that, Marty? Maybe you could tell me.
Terminator cosplay on stage.
Yeah.
Everyone.
I know Terminators had capes. In this world, they do.
But then March On is my current metal anthem for sure. It's fist in the air, one fist in the air, beer in hand in the other. March on, metal warrior, your day to fight. And then the chorus in Crimson Eyes, that's been stuck in my head the most out of any song on this album. It's great. And if I keep going, I'll talk about every single track on the album. So it's great.
For me, it's Ruby Eyes of the Serpent. I love the quirky guitar line that starts off. It shows that, he's not always writing in a standard phrase. He does some weird little things on that, which is really cool. I love the feel, the way JD's cut out the hearts of the children. He's got so much feel in it. It's like, fuck, dude. And they follow that up with "Don't Fear the Night." I love how it starts off real ballad-esque. And again, the mournful croon. It's just a sad tone. And, "Don't fear the night." Oh, my God. Just the inflections he does throughout the album. It's just the vamping at the end of some of the songs. He's a great fucking singer. He's a great singer. This is a band that they just sound like they just got done working, their 50 hours at the steel mill, clocked out and went to the bar and were drinking and saw this guy up on stage singing who knows what. I'm like, oh, let's, hey, what's up? And let's start a band. It's kind of the feel of this, but they tapped into this epic vibe. Yep. Ruby Eyes of the Serpent, Don't Fear the Night are two favorites. Red Horizon. Yeah, again, we rocked in a red horizon. Just the way the inflection and how he phrases the words over these choruses. It's like, how did he arrive at that? It's all feel. It's all from the heart, from the soul. He's singing through his soul, and it works just great. Hell's Gates, a nice mournful ending to the album. Make Me Your King, very triumphant. I love Warning of Danger. It's a great song. It's a great chorus. Again, I have no complaints. VBP. what a ripper. Again, they're showing off here, and it shows, but they show off, but they never go too far. They keep it musical, well-structured. It all makes sense. It isn't, too crazy. So, yeah, I have no complaints on this album at all. Judgment, final thoughts. Logan.
Yep. Well, it's easy to say that this was the most immediate and entertaining album that we've covered yet. I mean, especially when you're like used to, as I am, to the new wave of traditional heavy metal, like bands that are in this style, quote unquote, from like 2010 and on. This album immediately sounded like a timeless missing link among all those albums that I'm kind of already used to. And easily schooled bands that I'm, have loved, like Eternal Champion and Sumerlands. Like, this is definitely fits right in and above where those bands are. So for me, it's interesting as someone who got into metal in like the 2010s, really. Like, this whole scene and era kind of did get buried from my perspective. Like, and it's on Metal. It's on Metal Blade too, which is the weirdest part. Because guess what? The first like label I got into was Metal Blade. It was because of like Amon Amarth, Cannibal Corpse, Black Dahlia Murder. Right. That was like the big. That was the big metal label.
It's a very different Metal Blade. Very different Metal Blade.
A very different Metal Blade. And then to find that, their first iteration was filled with all of these like unique but trend-setting bands that are now kind of lost to the world, if you will. Like, I mean, Warlord, you can throw them as another perfect example.
But they're still putting out records in spite of their main songwriter passing away.
Yep. So, I mean, I think one of the main takeaways for me and really just being a part of this section of the BCLT in general is, don't let this music be forgotten to newer generations like myself. I know we're thick-headed and stubborn and always want to talk about like Death Heaven and metalcore and stuff, but keep trying. We can appreciate Omen and this style of music. I mean, I brushed over this album for far too long, and I don't want others to make the same mistake that I did. So I'm gonna start championing this album and others from this era, and really trying to keep spreading the word that these albums that are now like the 40th anniversary for this one's coming up next year.
Wow.
They keep getting listened to. But to kind of wrap it up, I guess, it's a seamless spin through a really a brutal fantasy style sword and sandal heavy metal record that I was hanging on every note. I mean, the songwriting is superb. The vocals and instrumentals are all top notch. And there's really not much I would change about this album. And I know for a fact I will continue to listen to this long after this stream is over. And I'll hunt this album down for sure to purchase. So I'm happy to give this my first like 9 to 9.5 rating for a Heavy Metallurgy album club. So definitely a great pick. Thank you, Marty.
I think we did some good work, the Lord's work today, folks. We got a young buck into Omen. Hey, all right, Jim, what's up?
Yeah, that's awesome. Great thing about this show is not only to younger folks like Logan being exposed to this band and getting into them and really enjoying it, but reminding me of this band. I haven't listened to Omen in years and years and years, and I actually just completely forgot about them. I don't own any of their stuff on physical. And so when Marty picked this, I was like stoked. I was like, oh yeah, I haven't listened to these guys in a long time, and didn't even really. I mean, I remember they were just straight heavy metal, but didn't remember what they actually sounded like. And it was such a cool coming home and appreciation of it. And I actually appreciate it even more now, because when I first heard Omen was back in the 80s, and they just straight up weren't heavy enough for me. I was listening to thrash. I was listening to stuff like Rain and Blood and The Accused and stuff like that. So I was like, what is this? This is not for me. It just wasn't heavy enough.
Oh yeah.
And as I got older and more refined, finally started listening to the older stuff like Judas Priest and Dio and stuff like that. Stuff that I dismissed as a thrash kid, and to come home back and revisit this album and to put it in its proper context and proper place, in my head was where it should be, in a place of reverence, was really great. So that's another thing, you're not only doing the Lord's work, Marty, for exposing younger folks like Logan, but also reminding older folks like me who've forgotten about it, So yeah, this is a 9 out of 10, and my apologies goes to JD. I will be buying this record, and it will be in the stack behind me. So,
right on. Kellen.
Yeah, well, I've kind of stated how much I love this record. So, and I guess the thing I'll just add in closing is, yes, go out, buy it. But Logan, like almost everyone in the 1980s, like this is world. American power metal was not an appreciated genre, or American epic so there's a lot of people who came late to it. I definitely came late to it. It was in, somewhere in the mid-aughts that I got into it, but there are tons of, I think, heavy metal fans who probably did not appreciate this band as much when they were out putting out these records. And a lot of so it's just one of those things where as much as I've listened to this record, in the past decade or so, I think it's important that we keep on, bringing it up and talking about it, instead of assuming that such a classic record is going to be understood by so many, realizing that so much of the heavy metal world kind of skipped over this and it's not talked about. And the fact that there's sort of confusion out of how to understand it and how to talk about it, how to appreciate it. It's cool that we got a chance to spend an hour plus talking about it. So yeah, classic record. If you want to say first 3, go for it. For me, first 2 Omen records are essential records, and awesome band, potentially the best heavy metal American vocalist ever for me. So yeah.
9.5 album for me all day. I don't know why. I don't want to give it a perfect score because nothing's really truly ever perfect. But it's a great snapshot in time, but it holds up. The talent is undeniable. It's timeless, and it's whenever I put it on, it's a joy. It's a joy to listen to. And it's okay, Cursed. Don't listen to what that bad man in Kentucky said.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Even though that cobra is incredibly freakishly huge if it's eating a wolf's head, but this is another good one. Another great JD Kimball performance on here. So,
is that the same cobra? So the wolf did not heed the warning?
No, it did not heed the warning. I don't know what really more to say other than I saw an iteration of Omen, Eternal Dawn or Eternal Black Dawn. I think that's the last Omen CD I have. It doesn't have JD on it. I don't even have Escape to Nowhere, which is another singer with the airbrushed lady in a bathing suit on the front. Yeah, it didn't look like the Omen I wanted to follow. But I saw them at the first ever Classic Metal Fest. The guy from Attacker, the singer for Attacker, put this fest on. A lot of great old bands, and I was skeptical, but the guy that came out and sang, he sounded very close to JD. I had a great time watching him. It was fun. And I know Kenny has put out some records. The last album came out in 2016 called Hammer Damage. And he just played Hell's Heroes here. And I think they got some guy from Greece singing or someone from overseas singing. Sounds pretty good. So Kenny's still doing it. And is it going to be as essential as these albums? I don't know. I haven't investigated enough, but rest in peace, JD Kimball. He was an American treasure in heavy metal vocals, and it's sad that he's not spoken in the same voices as Ronnie James Dio or, any other singers in that ilk, in that caliber, because he deserves it. He deserves to be. Great singer, great band. and it was a lot of fun. But that was that. I'm glad we got to ramble on for an hour and a half about a killer album, in my opinion. And next week would be normally Logan's pick, but he is going and getting married next week, everybody. So he won't be here. So congrats to
Congrats.
Thank
you
you.
and your
The
bride to be. Yeah. And
Wish her luck, I guess.
so we're skipping over one, and Kellen is the picking. And if you pick something complex and strange, I'm going to be sad. I'll be like, I just
You
want
got 1 week off, Marty. Back to it. Yeah. No, this might be a little bit of
a 75-minute epic of complexity and math problems through sonics. Yeah.
No, every once in a while, I choose an album, and this is kind of a makeup one. So hopefully, and Jim gets on and says, "Kellen, why do you hate me?" So we're going to Germany for this one. This is Living Death.
Oh, right on. I actually have that on vinyl.
From
Cool.
Reality.
Nice. I haven't listened to that record in a long time. Living Death.
Yeah, okay.
So hopefully this takes me out of the doghouse and it gives me a little bit more credibility other than why does this kid in Kentucky make me hate my life? So.
Oh my God. The worst one ever was when TJ held up that Portal record. I'm like, something inside of me shriveled up and died. It's like my metal soul. If you take a piece of tin foil and crumple it up into a little tiny ball, that's what happened when you held up that record. I'm like, oh, I got to listen to this train wreck for it seemed like a 3-hour long train wreck with a guy with a clock on his head. Great. Thanks, Tej.
It was only 30 minutes.
Oh God, it felt like an eternity. But anyway, awesome. Well, there you go. Living Death, protected from reality, and cheers to Logan and his missus. Have a great one. And show notes. The professor will be on a little family trip on Friday, so my guest co-host will be Rick from the Dreadful Minutes, and we'll be having Dennis from Analog Archives on to talk about something. We haven't got it figured out yet, but we'll be here. We'll be here for you guys. So, yep. And that's it. Anybody have anything to add?
Still finishing my editing on my video, so I've been slacking on that, but it's recorded and in the process of editing.
Awesome. Anybody else? Nope.
Cheers.
Cool. Everybody, thank you. Great Wednesday. We will see you. This group will see you next week. Cheers.